and some announcements. Anything I need to comment on or anything? Do notice about the labs. We're having labs today. I want you to come. The sections B, C, and D completed. Remember, something might be helpful for you in your life. You will get those sheets back. So put some thought into it. And I hope you enjoyed hearing some comments from some of the conversations that other students had with their parents and enjoyed the conversation you had with your parents. There's a hope. Our TA Chris Eyes is going to give a lecture on behavioral economics later. But there's been some things in the news related to behavioral economics, things I think y'all might find more interested in regular supply and demand, so I thought I'd show them to you. If you ever look at watches, whenever they're sold in the store, online, anytime, notice the time on the watches. You can see it well. They're not always the same. They tend to be pretty consistent. 10-10, 10-10, 10-10. Usually always 10-10. Must be some kind of psychology thing. But they even, a study went and looked back in art during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance when people would draw like clock towers in the time, and they tended to put in the paintings 10-10. Or something that looked like a smiley face, maybe that's why. Looks happy, a happy watch. I don't know. Also, by having the hands there, it makes it easier to see some other things that's in the watch sometimes, maybe the name brand. Those of you who shop at JCPenney, you may have seen a lot of different things going on. They had a new CEO, someone they took from Apple, a marketing guru of sorts, and from what I've read, JCPenney, it used to be one of these places where there was always a sale, 50% off, 20% off. Wow, everything's almost close to free. Come in and buy. And the guy came in and said, this is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, it's kind of silly that we don't know what that pre-price was before you took 50-70% off. It probably never even existed. You know, it does seem kind of strange for smart people like us to come in and say, oh, 70% off, it must be a good deal. Without even thinking, well, what is 70% off what? $10 million? Now, it does seem kind of silly. And so he came in and said, this is not going to work. What consumers want now is to know that anytime they come in, they're going to get a good deal on anything, so they tried it. They tried that whole scheme. Got rid of most of the sales, all of the sales, I don't know. And tried just having consistent, transparent prices, and it didn't work, and he's no longer there. Turns out people like the prices. That they like the sales. They like the 70% off. Doesn't really make sense. Maybe shouldn't happen, but people like it anyway. It's kind of one of those things like why so many things end at 99 cents. It just doesn't have a good explanation. It's just more of a psychological fact. And there are a group of economists who go out and gather those little facts. You probably hear of Nobel Prize winners in economics, but there's another prize that's almost as famous among economists, just the Bates-Clark's medal. It's given to a young person, I think under the age of 30, who's doing particularly interesting work. And the winner this year was a man named Raj Chetty, and I want to tell you kind of the three main things he's been researching that got him dealing with it. One has to do with retirement. You know, when you go to take your job, some places you're going to come in and they're going to have a 401k retirement system where you automatically save, say, 20% of your savings towards retirement, but you can opt out. You can decrease that 20% to 0%. Other places you go in, it's the exact same retirement system, except starting you off at 0%. Instead of starting you off at 20%, they start you off at 0%. And if you want to save up to 20%, you just save it. I mean, you just change it from 0 to 20. Exact same retirement plan, the default is different. And that default has an enormous difference. When people save a lot more when they happen to work for a place where the default savings rate was high. They just stick with whatever they started with. That's something called anchoring bias that Chris is going to talk a lot about later. He discovered that shoppers don't really even pay attention to sales taxes. They just look at the pre-tax price. They don't think much about sales tax. What I think is particularly interesting, he said he looks at equalization of opportunity in America, and he was particularly interested in the school systems. You know, not all Americans agree that we should have the same outcomes, that we should all have the same income, but there's a considerable agreement that we should all have similar opportunities. We should be somewhat equal in opportunities. What he did, he went in and he studied people who had good teachers when they were in elementary school and people who didn't have good teachers when they were in elementary school. I don't know exactly how we went about doing this, but it was published in a good location, so he must have done it well. But what he found was that people who had really good teachers in elementary school did a lot better in life. You know, they didn't just make higher SAT scores. They made a lot more money after they graduated. So those things that happen when children are young in elementary school follows them throughout their whole life. To kind of motivate what we're doing today, we looked at supply and demand, where we talk about prices and try to understand prices. What I'm doing now is I'm taking that regular supply and demand, and I'm saying now it's the long-run supply and demand, meaning we're not just looking at price changes over a couple of months. We're talking about what if demand increases and that demand increase is sustained for years. How do we think about prices then? An example might be, suppose you work for a company that's considering building a sorghum processing facility. Well, they buy sorghum and process it however you need to make it into cattle feed. And you're trying to figure out, will this processing plant be profitable? Well, it depends partially on the price of sorghum. If the price of sorghum is really high, it might not be as profitable. If you can get your inputs for cheap, then the sorghum processing facility might be more profitable. And if you look at sorghum prices from 1949 up until 2009, and they're erratic, there's some kind of trend, and then it moves up like this. And suppose we're right here, and you say, well, it's 2009 right now, prices are high, this plant is not profitable. Well, that's not a very good analysis. But instead you might say, well, it's 2009, prices are really high, but are they really going to stay this high? This isn't consistent at all with history. And if prices are really high, won't that induce more people to become farmers than before? More people to plant more sorghum. It's kind of like new firms entering the industry. New firms come in, more sorghum's planted, sorghum prices come back down. So after the next 10 years, you may the best forecast of sorghum prices might be somewhere around here, where a processing plant might be profitable. The point is, you may be like that former student of mine that I introduced you to, Lindsay Kuzma, who every week goes into a supply and demand meeting. And they call it supply and demand. It's the official name of the meeting title. And what they do is they talk about prices, the outlook for prices, the prices that they get for the products they sell, the prices they pay for the inputs. It's for Koch Industries. And when they're thinking about prices and they try to forecast in the future, they just don't look at what prices are now, they look at what prices have been in the future, and they try to think about what will a market do in response to current high prices and current low prices. And in that case, you've got to be able to think about whether firms will enter an industry or firms will exit an industry. And that's the kind of thing we're going to be trying to do today. Well, let me start you off with an example that's kind of easy to envision. There were many people who wanted to watch the trial of Obamacare when the constitutional mandate of Obamacare went to the Supreme Court. A lot of people wanted to be there in the Supreme Court to see if the Supreme Court would strike down Obamacare or not. But most of the people who wanted to be in that court, they made good money. And the value of them working was far too high for them to stand in line to go to the Supreme Court. If they spend 3 hours standing in line at the Supreme Court, that may be $1,000 to them. The opportunity cost of time is too high. But what they do instead, they hire people to stand in for them. They take people whose opportunity cost is low, unskilled laborers who can't make much money elsewhere, And they pay them to stand in line. These are the people in line at the volunteer trial. And they pay them a certain wage. It ended up being about $13 an hour, I believe. And then when it's time to come into the building, the people come in, they trade places with the standard, and then they go in there. It's easy to envision that. What I want you to do now is think of each person, each standard, as being like a firm, a business. And that person can choose to come into the industry and be a standard. And that person can choose to leave the industry. Obviously, if they can get a really high price for standing in line, lots of people are going to want to be here and be a standard. If the compensation provided to them is low, maybe no one wants to be a standard. And suppose we're starting here with only 3 standards. Let's think about the short run. What happens in the next 5 minutes? Absurd short run, but you'll see why in a minute. There's only 3 people. Then suppose there's 20 highfalutin lawyers who come in and want to hire standards, but there's only 3 of them. There's 20 people who want to hire standards. There's a mismatch there. And in that 5 minutes, you can't just get new standards. They're not just sitting out there waiting to be called in. You have to get them from somewhere. And so in that next 5 minutes, you cannot change the quantity of standards. It's just 3. But as the lawyers bid over who's going to get the standard, the price can go really high. So in the short run, the quantity doesn't change, but price can change a lot. Then think about what happens in the long run, after 5 minutes. It doesn't take long before word gets out that people want more standards. These people probably have friends. They start making some calls. And if they're started off with just 3 standards and 20 lawyers who wanted to hire standards, and now we go to the long run when we can have new firms come in, meaning new standards, well then, you may get a lot of people. Suppose the lawyers start bidding up the price of these standards to $30 an hour. If y'all heard about this, y'all would run right there. $30 an hour is high to just stand in line. And so people hear about this, and a lot of people come and say, I will do it for $30. But now if there are 20 lawyers and maybe 50 people who want to be standards, now negotiation power has changed into the hands of the lawyers, and they can start dropping the wage back down. And they're probably going to get it back down to $13 an hour, something that's close to their opportunity time, what they could make elsewhere. So now in the long run, the price has not changed at all. It changes very little, but quantity can change a lot. And that's exactly what we're going to see with supply and demand in the short run and in the long run. In the short run, price changes a lot, quantity changes a little, and in the long run, price doesn't change much, but quantity does. I'm going to basically do 3 things. I'm first going to draw a graph of how supply looks different in the long run and short run. Then we're going to tell the story of what happens in the long run with the demand increase, and then what happens with the demand decrease. In each case, we're going to have graphs and a little bit of narrative about the graphs. In one of the stories, we're going to copy basically this graph and have some things around it. I put it up here just so you can see in advance what I'm going to. Might help you draw your own. And this is the case where you don't have to draw the graphs yourself if you don't want to, but making yourself draw the graphs makes you think about it more, makes you be more deliberate about engaging in this topic. What we're talking about is supply and demand in the long run. Long run can mean a lot of things. For us, it's just a period of time after which new firms can enter and old firms can go out of business. Long run is a period of time after which new firms can enter and old firms can exit. I say enter the market, I mean becoming a new person selling that good. When I mean exit the market, I mean going out of business. Let's not write this down, but I want you to know this thing I call firm is really a metaphor. It could be a new factory. It could be a new business. It could also be a metaphor for someone who has a business and is expanding it. Someone who has one processing facility and now builds another one exactly like it, or another one a lot like it. Could be a farmer who was farming 1,000 acres a week, but now farming 2,000. Just using firms as a metaphor for a lot of things. Think about anything that's like a new factory. What I'm going to do now, you see up there, there is a green line for supply. That's just regular supply. Whenever we say regular supply, that means the short run, a period of time in which there's really not enough time for new people to come in and old people to run a business. But the blue line is the long run supply curve. It looks very different. We're not using the term here. We talked about last, this is more, so more elastic supply. We're just closer to a horizontal line. So I'm going to draw short run supply and then long run supply. So it's going to be a regular graph in the PMT space. The short run supply just has a very conventional supply curve. Our long run supply is going to be close to a horizontal line. And the reason that for any price increase, if you give an economy, a market more time, it's easier for a market to respond to a price increase. So think about it like this. The price of corn goes up by $1 per bushel. That means initially the current corn farmers maybe just grow new corn. But on the same land, there's only so much more corn you can get. That's the short one. That price increase in corn, increased corn supply is just the low. Now you have the long run. Now land that wasn't being planted in any corn or anything maybe is now being planted in corn. Now you get a huge quantity response in the long run when new people can start planting corn, when corn farmers can really expand their acreage. So here, short run for any price increase, you just get a little bit quantity increase. Over here, say just a small price increase, you get a huge quantity increase. And that's a story we're going to see several times as we go through these stories. What we've seen thus far, as you can imagine, the type of questions I'll ask, you'll see this on one of the homework. But I'm going to show you a supply curve like the green one, show you a supply curve like the blue one, and ask you which one is the long one supply curve. You just pick the one that's flat. That's what you're responsible for, the one on this ball. Now what I want to start to do is imitating this graph. I'm going to draw a short run supply curve, a long run supply curve, a demand curve, and I want all three curves to intersect at one point. And I'm going to leave a little space over here because here's where I'm going to write some narratives about the story. Okay. Two cases, increase in demand, decrease in demand. This one is increase in demand in long. This is our starting point. Supply and demand cross here, so does the long run supply cross there. You'll see why I have everything starting off at the same point. That's just where we start. Can y'all read this word equilibrium over here? So I'm just saying start in equilibrium, and let's call this point A. That's where we start. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have an increase in demand, and this is going to be a sustained increase in demand. This is like we're talking about meat, like the switch from people's diets from carbs from protein, something sustained that we see is going to be there for many years. So I'm going to write here, permanent increase in demand. Permanent increase in the demand to DH. My regular demand was D. My new demand, permanent new increase in demand, is D superscript H. I'm going to draw this in just like over there. It's going to be the last curve I added to this diagram. All I do is just shift the demand curve up to the edge. What we're doing here is we're going to sort out what happens initially, like in the short run, and then in long. If we didn't have this long run supply curve right here, we know we would just go to our regular D and regular S, cost supply and demand, and our new equilibrium would be at point B. So I'm going to say, and I'm going to write this here, in the short run, we go from point A to point B. Price increases and quantity increases. Now we go to the long run. So this increase in demand, it increased price. And now other people who see there's a higher price in this market, they're now going to want to get into the market and sell that good. Just like when the government started mandating we use a certain amount of ethanol in our cars, demand for corn went up, the price of corn went up, then all of a sudden people planted corn in places they had never planted it before. I've seen corn grown in regions you would never expect corn to be grown. Because the price is so high, it induces people to come to that new firm. So I'm going to write here, the next thing that happens is that firms enter the market, and when new firms enter the market, there's more quantity, and that more quantity starts to drive prices back down. I'm going to write it in a minute, but think about it. There's a price jumps up because of increase in demand. Other people say, I want in on that market. I like money. I want to sell it too. They jump in the market. They start selling lots of stuff. That more stuff starts driving prices back down. Then we end up in a situation where price did go up a lot, but then it started going back down. So in the long run, it only went up a little. Quantity increased a lot. You probably see where I'm going with this. In the long run, we'll stop using the S curve, the short run supply curve, and we'll start using the long run supply curve, and we'll go from B to C. So I'm right here for price rises, new firms into the market. Price rises, that causes new firms to enter the market. Quantity rises, which causes price to fall. Now we're at point C. So in the short run, we went from A to B. In the long run, we went from B to C or A to C, however you want to think about it. As I was showing this diagram in the chapter, going from here to here in the long run, or here to here, however you want to think about it, it says new firms enter the market in response to demand increase. I'm now going to erase this right here and just write a few more things. Those essential things for review. Now we're asking about the outcome of this. We'll talk through it, and then I'm going to write the words on the board. Regardless of whether we're talking about a short run or long run, the demand increase did increase price, and it did increase quantities in both the short run and the long run. You can see that in the short run, price went up a lot, but in the long run, that price increase shrunk. Once you gave markets time to adjust, new firms to enter, the demand increase did cause price to rise, but not as much as it did initially. Price rises, both cases. Using the words a lot and little don't mean much. What I'm trying to say here, I've got price rises. In the short run, rose a lot. In the long run, rose a little. I'm showing these sorghum prices again. Sorghum prices are kind of in normal state, then they jump up. What we're trying to say here is this huge price increase right here, that's the short run, probably due to increase in the price of corn, due to a lot of things, because sorghum is a substitute for corn and animal feed. But although in the short run it goes up a lot, we would expect in the long run, once more people start planting sorghum and the quantity of sorghum rises, that this price would come back down. So this is just saying this price increase is temporary. The large price increase is temporary. So when I say in the long run it rose a little, that's just me saying it didn't rise as much as it did in the short run. Quantity rose. In short run, rose a little. In long run, rose a lot. So once people do start planting more sorghum, there's going to be a lot more sorghum in the market. In the long run, it will rise a lot. As that more sorghum comes on the market, it will dampen that price increase, and the short run can only rise a little, long run can only rise a lot. We'll see a lot more sorghum in the future. The price won't be quite as high. Good? Stick with me. I know it's not that decided. It's important. I'm going to do the opposite story real quick. Now we're looking at a decrease in demand in the long run.
Are we drawing the chart again?
Yes. I am at least. There's the chart that I'm going to draw. Starting in equilibrium at point A, then demand falls to D superscript L, the demand level. Demand goes here. So the short run is the short run, so we're ignoring the long run supply curve here. We go from the old intersection of supply and demand to the new intersection of supply and demand. We go from A to B, where we see price go down the line. I'm writing price falls a lot and quantity falls a little. The price fall is going to be a lot compared to what happens in the long run. Quantity fall is going to be a little compared to what's going to happen in the long run. So anytime I'm saying a lot, that means a lot compared to the other case, like the long run. We have that price increase, we know that, and that price increase is going to drive some people out of business. That price increase causes some firms to exit the market. When they exit the market, they also take with them all the stuff that they were producing. And as they exit the market, quantity falls, causing prices to rise. In the long run, we are at point C. Short run went from A to B, price decrease, caused some people to go out of business. As they went out of business, they took all the stuff they were producing with them, and quantity falls even more, and that quantity decrease causes prices to rise, because that stuff becomes more scarce. Here's the last. We're going to write 6 compared to the short run. Price falls is a little. Quantity falls a lot. Compared to that short run, price only falls a little, quantity falls a lot. Clickers. These clicker questions are going to let us go through those stories again. We'll show you the format of how I ask questions. As you're going to see, the most important thing about this chapter, as far as what you need to know, is what the long run supply curve looks like, and how when you have a demand increase or decrease, how the price change compares in the long run to the short run. So we're starting off in some kind of equilibrium, point A, where I'm telling you the price is 80. Then the demand for cattle falls, just like the example we did. A sustained decrease in demand. And it's always going to be a sustained demand decrease. I'm never going to say give you a temporary demand decrease. Initially, prices fall to 70. What do we know about the long-run equilibrium price? I'm going to show you the graph in a minute, but look at the question again. Initially, prices fall to 70. What do we know about the long-run equilibrium price? Here's the demand decrease. We start here, point A. In the short run, initially, we go down to here. And in the long run, we come up here. So if we go from 80 to 70, what do we know about that new price in the long run? Awesome. You got it exactly. That's easy. That's what the question is going to be like. So this is one of those things, if you get it, you almost don't need to study much more. I'm not telling you not to study, though. We're starting off at the same place, at an equilibrium of $80 per hundredweight. Now this is sustained increase in demand. Initially, prices rise to 90. What happens next? Start the timer now. Very good. You recognize rightly that when price increases, that's going to motivate people to enter the market. More rewards for producing cattle. Then you also recognize if more people come into the market and start producing more cattle, that additional supplies from those new firms are going to decrease prices. It's not going to cause prices to fall back to 80, and certainly not below 80. But instead of being 90, it may go to 83, 82. Very good. Now notice that instead of price, we're talking about quantity. We start off at an equilibrium, 800 million hundredweight. Demand for cattle rises. That demand increases sustained. Initially, in the short run, finally rises to 900 million. What do we know about it? Quantity in the long run. Think about it like this. We have the demand increase due to the age. Initially, quantity goes from here to here, but in the long run, as more people, price goes up, more people come in, they're going to be able to produce even more. So if we went from 800 to 900, we know in the long run we're going to get even more than 900. Have a nice day.